This episode of Ludonarrative Dissidents is brought to you by Laszlo Szidonya. He wants to shout out Aron Peterfy. Aron is my friend and was and is the game master of role-playing game campaigns that have provided me and my fellow players years of role-playing enjoyment. I'd like to thank him for his work and dedication. Thanks, Laszlo, for supporting the Kickstarter, and I hope you and Aron have many more games together. Enjoy the episode.
This is Ludonarrative Dissidents, a podcast about tabletop role-playing games, how they're made, and how they're played. Over the next hour, 3 experienced game designers, Ross Payton, Greg Stolze, and me, James Wallace, will field strip a game or supplement, discussing how it works, how players use it, and what we can learn from it. Read show notes for each episode on our website, www.ludonarrativedissidents.com, where you can also join our Discord server, and find links to our library of previous episodes. But for the moment, enjoy this episode of Ludonarrative Dissidents.
Hello, and welcome to the Ludonarrative Dissidents podcast. This is Season 3, Episode 8, as we are reviewing Ars Magica Grogs, our second supplement of this season. This supplement is about the underappreciated characters of Ars Magica. If you haven't listened to our previous episode on Ars Magica and you don't know what a Grog is, probably head back to that episode and listen. But if you are familiar, the Grogs are the non-magical characters that assist in a covenant, which is a group of wizards, and they are the servants, the bodyguards, the people,
the do-boys, the grunts,
the spear carriers in ancient Greek tales,
factotums.
Yes,
the Greek chorus in terms of narrative purpose. Sometimes.
Sometimes, yeah.
I would also guess sometimes they are the red shirts who die to show how the monster works.
Yes, but crucially, they are, as well as being a crew of NPCs and a pool of NPCs, they are also player characters.
Well, I mean, that's contradictory. They're not a pool of NPCs. They're a pool of lesser PCs. Children of a lesser character class.
Yeah, but they're not all PCs all of the time. This is the thing. They exist, and when they're not being PCs, they're under GM control, which I think is really interesting. This is one of the things that distinguished Ars Magica when it came out in 1987 as a little scrappy indie RPG and won the Origins Award for Best RPG. This whole idea of troupe play, the idea that you don't have one PC, you have a group of PCs, and their power levels are radically different. One of your PCs is a magi, and the others are much lower level, who kind of, as we were saying, dance around them, serving them part of this wider community, the covenant that all the PCs should be a part of.
Mm-hmm.
And you can dip into them. You can play your magi. You can play your magus. Magus. We're never going to get pronunciations on this stuff right, are we? Various of us, we pronounce Ludonarrative Dissidents, the name of the podcast, in different ways.
What do you mean we there, Englishman?
Yeah.
Englishman who studied Latin for more years than I care to remember.
So is it vis or wees?
It should. I was taught in the 1980s a bit Weiss, because the Romans did not pronounce V with a V sound, with what we think of as a V sound. They pronounced it with a W sound. Apparently. I don't know who they asked. Anyway, we're getting off the track. The idea is sometimes you're a magus, sometimes you're a grog, and sometimes that's structured. And one of the things in this book,
and sometimes you're a companion.
Sometimes you're companions as well. The kind of
the shrinking middle class of Ars Magica,
the second in command. Yes.
Yeah. Honestly, one of the highlights of the Ars Magica as a game for me, because I'm often interested in the little guys, the regular guys, the henchmen of the main bad guy, the Rosencrantz and Guildensterns of Shakespeare.
Yes.
And a game where the wizards are very powerful and aloof, and there's specific game mechanics. Basically, there's a lot of Ars Magica is about how the the gift of magic alienates wizards from humanity, as it instinctively scares them away. But the Grogs have built up a resistance to it, because it explains this mechanic. But this is an interesting premise, because if you wanted to do the Canterbury Tales, or like I mentioned, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are Dead style of game, this is perfect for you. One of my favorite RPGs to run is Slasher Flick, which is a troupe style RPG, but based on horror films.
Is this the perfect for medieval dogs' bodies? I don't know if I agree with that. If you want to play Ars Magica and have it be based around the the characters who in another game would be mooks, then yeah, that's the Grogs. And the Grogs are, I like the idea of Grogs, and I like the troupe style idea. I think that opens up a lot of great possibilities. But if you're not going to have the companions and the wizards around, would you use Ars Magica to just play Grogs? Because there's so much of it that's... I mean, the sun of Ars Magica around which everything orbits is the magic, and playing extremely mundane characters, all mundane characters, in this extremely magical setting, like, well, you are gonna just trip over rules that are there for magic folk that you don't need or use, but like every 10 steps you're gonna be like Sideshow Bob with a rake. And so it's, I mean, if I was just gonna play medieval schmucks, it'd be like, okay, well, why don't we just have a much simpler rule set for medieval schmucks? Because the rules as construed have to account for the fact that you might want to play a horse that walks on water, and that's not a typical medieval schmuck character. That's an Ars Magica Grog character.
Yeah, there's a lot of the Grog characters who are, they are not just the peasantry or indeed the middle class of the Middle Ages. They are supernatural or have supernatural origins, that you can play Grogs who are, have somehow got lost in time. There's an example of a bunch of Roman soldiers who rock up, go, hello, we're confused.
It's not somehow.
In Latin.
It's the fairy did it.
Yeah.
Because they constantly do. There's all these fairy tales and myth stories about, oh, well, yep, the Unsilly, he went and danced with the Unsilly for a night, but when he came back, 10 years had passed. And they're like, oh, and then, the Seelie Fairy are like, oh, hold my beer. We're going to have this guy over for a weekend, and when he's done, it's going to be 100 years later. His name's Rip Van Winkle. It's going to be hilarious.
Oh yeah. It's like rule number one of all myths: don't fuck with the fairies. Yeah, they will. I was tangentially reminded this afternoon of a plot for a thing that I've been kicking around with my wife, who is a screenwriter, about a gangster who's sent to Ireland to wipe out a chap called O'Brien. And he's got it written down, and he's not a great reader, and of course falls in love with this Irish lass who's, her mother is a wise woman and stuff, and she looks at the piece of paper and goes, that doesn't say O'Brien, that says Oberon. You've been sent to kill the king of the fairies. And it goes, end Act 1. Grogs, the thing is, we did talk about the fairy stuff when we reviewed Ars Magica in Season 1, Episode 8. Episode still online, Ludonarrative Dissidents fans, because they're an important part of the background, but they don't play very much part in the Grogs book. The Grogs book is quite grounded in the real world. It takes flight from time to time, but mostly it's about real-world characters working for the Covenant, because the Covenant is a real-world organization, though it is steeped in magic.
And there are some very interesting bits in it. What was the Via Carus? I'm like, is this a real historical thing?
Are you sure you don't mean the Via Carus?
Okay, that I brought that upon myself, didn't I?
That was the variant of the corpse robber, right?
I have been carrying that axe above your neck for the last 10 minutes.
I didn't want your hands to get tired. Those axes are heavy.
Well, I appreciate that.
But the idea of the urticarius, if a person got really, really sick in the Middle Ages and was given last rites, but then recovered, you would think this would be great and everyone would be happy, but no. They are, instead, it's like, well, last rites, you're technically a dead man now. So your marriage is dissolved. You cannot own property. You cannot leave property. Your heirs are going to take whatever property you had, and you're bad luck, man. You're the walking dead in the eyes of the law.
Oh, and you can't be absolved of any future sins. So don't sin anymore. Otherwise, you're definitely going to hell.
Well, that is the church position, is that you have to be completely morally upright because any sin will fall upon you and you won't be able to get rid of it. But that the folk response to that is, no, you're already recorded. So any sins you do now don't count. So go buck wild, my man. And this feels like an authentic piece of historical bonkersness.
Mm-hmm.
If it is made up, kudos to whoever wrote it. If it's not made up, kudos to whoever found that and stuck it in Ars Magica.
It is a great plot hook, yeah.
I would suspect this bit having been edited by David Chart, who's been the Ars Magica line editor, I think, for as long as it's been at Atlas. It's probably David Chart, knowing David, or I knew David before he went off to Japan. Yeah, there's an awful lot of historical stuff in here, some of which feels tangential and almost... There's a sense of it being a little bit like a Peter Ackroyd book. Facts are in there because he found them in his research and he's slightly showing off. And it's not 100% relevant to the plot, but it's interesting. It's all interesting. Yeah. And it fleshes out the setting.
Yeah, I think that's the core of this book. In some ways, I was actually thinking back to Double Tap because, Double Tap, we talked about how the world of espionage is not something the average, gamer is going to be familiar with. And unless you have like a master's or PhD in medieval history, you're not going to necessarily know how a medieval household is going to be run, or like a covenant, which is sort of like a minor fiefdom. So the major sort of sections of this book are one, Grogs and the Covenant, which are the types of Grogs and like this kind of material, this kind of tradecraft of like how the nuts and bolts of what daily life is like and what Grogs actually do.
If you want to realistically play an enchanted Thatcher, well,
you got to have like some context. You don't know, like, right? Yeah, because it's so different from what we know and what we personally experience. That like you got to have some sort of rock, some sort of foundation to build upon.
The mythic farrier is one of the character types in there. Which mythic farrier, that's great. You can make enchanted horseshoes. Yeah, what do you do the rest of the time?
Yeah, you're making regular horseshoes.
and Greg, you were saying you wouldn't necessarily take this on as a book, an adjunct to without the Ars Magica structure. If you wanted to understand how to run an early medieval estate or even a mid-medieval estate, it's not really doesn't quite go as far as the Renaissance stuff, but the source material in that chapter on just the structure of a large, probably rural organization, how in terms of the staff, who reports to who, this is golden. This is so good in terms of being able to plot out that stuff. And immediately you're reading it, you're going, oh no, wait, but what if he's dissatisfied, and what if she's actually working for someone else, and what if they're in love? This could and suddenly you're not just doing a role, but the whole thing's a soap opera, and some of them are player characters. It's potentially wonderful stuff if that's the sort of game you want to run.
And that's a good start, but like then the second chapter is really, I think, and this is going to be for the rest of the book, is Grogs Alone, which is storytelling advice, which is like providing idea plot hooks and like showcasing the Grogs, the routine duties, and also like
and specifically if the Magi are not there, it's how do you run stories for just Grogs?
And what I really love is that it has the genres, like you can do them as everything from action adventure to mystery, horror drama. Like it's any type of, you could have any type of story featuring the Grogs,
and of course comedy,
yeah, of course.
Which I think the Grogs tend to get drawn into the light side of it more, because the wizards and companions are the huge, mythic, serious figures, the great men of history, if you ascribe to the great man theory of history, which is questionable, but very popular in role-playing games where you're only going to have 4 or 5 players. And that lets the Grogs be, as we've said, the little guys, the Greek chorus, the people whose humble circumstances put everything else into perspective. And I think that's something that maybe does not get a ton of play in a lot of games. I'm thinking of something here with Hayao Miyazaki, right? And if you've seen Spirited Away, which is a beautiful movie, a Japanese animated film where a young girl has to work off the debt her parents incurred to the yokai because they ate the food they shouldn't have. So, I mean, some things are...
Talking about the Fae again, basically.
I mean, basically. And so she's at a bathhouse for spirits and has to, like, clean up and all these mundane things, but makes friends and does all the Miyazaki Studio Ghibli stuff. But there's a scene where she takes a train trip, and there's a fairly extended shot of her just waiting at a train station with one of the spirits, and then being on the train with the spirit, and they don't talk or interact or push the plot or develop their characters. And when asked about this, Miyazaki's thing was, sometimes you just need to let it breathe. It's like when you're making bread, you need to give it time to prove. And so many movies now insist on getting their money's worth out of every second of screen time, and it becomes so hectic. And because there are no small scenes, all the big scenes feel small. I'm paraphrasing and putting words in his mouth grossly, even beyond translation. But the idea of the pause has stayed with me, and this is, the Grog story, or even just the scenes where the Grogs are hanging out. I mean, imagine in a typical dungeon fantasy game where everyone has these, super powerful broadswords and wizards are tearing down the veils between reality, and the player group has saved the world a couple times. Those games almost never have the scene where, like, you cut back to the guys who are watching the ponies that all the second tier magic weapons are presumably stored in, and all the wizards' reagents, and just them outside the dungeon going, so how you think they're doing in there? You think they're probably doing okay. Oh, you saw that smoke come out of the crack in the ground over there. That was certainly a fireball. I mean, that was one of ours. It smelled like one of his. And then they make jokes about, he who smelt it dealt it. Our wizards fireballs are sure stinky. I'm thinking that might be fun. Yeah. But it doesn't happen 100%. Because characters like that aren't part of the dungeon fantasy concept. Or if they are, you start out as them, and once you've left them behind, you don't want to go back to them. It's like, why would I want to go back to being first level? That sucked. The progression fantasy. I was a magic user. A cat could have killed me. Yeah. Now I know cloud kill. Everyone's afraid of me. Life is good.
Yeah, but it's Shakespeare did the same thing, and I've run fantasy parties of fantasy adventurers through not exactly the same thing, not just being the hirelings, but being them on an off day, just going shopping. And they love that. Just a shopping episode. There's not much happens. but it's fun. It's downtime. It's banter. It's what we were talking about in the Savage Worlds thing, the moment where your PCs just get an opportunity to tell stories about who they were before the game started. Those interludes just make the whole texture of the game so much richer. They add so much to it. And I think it's almost literally adding another dimension. You're seeing the game world from a completely different direction, a completely different set of eyes, or multiple sets of eyes. Different concerns, different priorities. It's the farrier, the ordinary farrier, what do they care about the doings of wizards and the great tribunals and stuff? They're like, no, where am I going to get enough iron to shod, because winter's coming in and all the trade caravans are going to stop, but we got to keep the horses shod. Their concerns are very, very different. They're not just at the beck and call of the wizards, and it gives the world so much richness.
I know some of the favorite moments, like it's become like a reoccurring joke on RPPR campaigns of the dinner party in every campaign, which started with a D&D campaign. And so every campaign I try to have at least one like big, social gathering where the characters can talk about what's happened so far and interact with NPCs they've met. And they love it. It's become a tradition. So I try to fit it in, even if it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Not so much in the Delta Green campaign. Well, even in the Delta Green, even in Impossible Landscapes, I had to see like scenes where like, you gotta get food. Where are you going? All right, what are you talking about while you eat? Describe the diner in loving detail and that kind of thing. Having these slow moments, small moments. That's the still life principle of like Japanese film is like sort of a core principle. You see this from Kurosawa and earlier all the way to Studio Ghibli and Miyazaki, of the reflecting on the temporal, the pause, the flow of time and life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Grogs help capture that, and I think one of
Grogs slow it down.
Because Grogs slow it down, and also they give more breadth to the campaign as well. Because like if you think about prestige television shows, which is what like a lot of people want their campaign to resemble in terms of storytelling, right? Is like Game of Thrones and shows like that have a huge number of characters, and we switch from point of view to point of view. So while we have lords and ladies and generals and knights fighting each other, we also have the servants and the bandits and the minor characters scrabbling to survive, to show what it's like on the other side and to give different perspective on things. So even, I know Ars Magica is designed. I remember that it's designed for like focus on the cool wizard stuff. But like every once in a while, it's cool to see, what's happening from a different perspective. So like have a game where the corpse robbers are going to the graveyard to deal with the spooky
lower
ghost.
Decks.
And it's lower decks. Yeah, and when the wizards come out to kill to banish the evil ghost in the graveyard, they feel like, haha, we got our asses kicked. Our Grogs got their asses kicked, not us personally, even though we're the same players.
Yes.
That sense of accomplishment is so much better. Yeah.
There can be less bleed with the Grog character, or conversely, I can see how you could get really, because players do this, right? It's, you the GM create this villain or complicated ally anti-hero type who, they got to work with him, but they're not going to like him. Or, they like him, but he's kind of on the other side, but kind of doing his own thing. And you've got this elaborate backstory built in, and none of the players care. And they're like, what about that girl, Jess, who served me a donut? What's going on with Jess? Jess seemed cool. Mm-hmm. Did she get her homework done for poetry class? Did she get a good grade? And you're like, why are you so focused on Jess? And 2 sessions later, they will kill and die for Jess.
Oh, yeah.
You cannot make an NPC or just a passing character too interesting, or you will derail your entire campaign.
Yeah, don't do a funny voice, especially. Meepo Scrimbus the Goblin is the emotional backbone of the campaign, because he's the cat out Meepo, and then like everybody loves him.
And now you have to do that voice for the next 2 years.
Don't do a pirate voice either. I'll tell you that much.
Whereas I would steer into that. I'd be like, I get to do a pirate voice. I get to do my crappy, I know it's bad, everyone knows it's bad, but I love it anyway, pirate voice for for 2 years of Sundays, sign me up. This is the hill I will die by my own hand on. Arr!
Yeah.
And your Grog, the Grog character, the Grogs have no plot immunity, right? They are, by definition, the disposables.
Well, not disposable. Like, they do talk about a lot, like how they are valuable because, for one thing, they're immune to they develop a resistance to the gift, so they can hang around wizards without freaking out. And be used to being around magic, but
they're not like a companion, and they're certainly not like a wizard.
No.
And given the choice between losing a Grog or losing a really finely crafted, exquisite telescope, a lot of wizards would be like, well, how long is that Grog gonna be alive anyway? And with longevity spells, I could still be using this telescope in 200 years.
Yeah, a telescope you've got to send to Italy for the best lenses. It's just
that's it.
Yeah, they breed on their own. They don't even need to make them do it.
Yeah, we'll support his widow. Yeah, and the widow's already pregnant. Or, I mean, she's not a widow yet, but like she,
the pre-widow.
Yeah, the pre-widow.
The widow to be.
Yeah, so 20 years.
So, but this allows the Grog, therefore, does not have the plot protection that a wizard has. Because a wizard in Ars Magica, I'm going to guess, they're really hard to kill because they've got magic, and they're like, well, my first wish is to not die.
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, if the Thatcher. If the Covenant Thatcher dies, that does not derail the GM's plans. But it's still, if you get invested, it's like, oh man, no, the Thatcher was so cool and now he's dead. Oh, curse you, Infernals. You'll pay for the Thatcher. It's a character who can be suddenly and unexpectedly killed without it looking like a weird GM move the way suddenly unexpectedly killing a wizard would be.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. It's pathos, but it's just one episode's pathos. It's not like an ongoing, oh man, and you can call back to it, of course. But it is that rare thing in role-playing games. They're player characters who, have a potentially short lifespan. Paranoia is really one of the only examples until you start getting onto one-shots and the whole area of gaming that's boomed in the last decade or so. But this, the edition we're looking at, I think this is, I don't know if Grogs was original to 5th edition Ars Magica, which is the current edition, but it's a 2012 book, I think.
I believe. I think it's like
2012, 2013, which reminds me briefly, talking about Ars Magica, game with a long history that we go into when we in the first episode where we talked about the main thing, but there have been developments in as much as Atlas are, as we are recording this, about to start crowdfunding what they're calling Ars Magica the Definitive Edition, which is the first new edition in about 20 years. Because I remember us saying back when we did the current edition of the rulebook, this is a rule book that, with grey hairs on it. This is a rule book whose voice has long broken. So they're doing a definitive edition, but they are also open sourcing the 5th edition rules. And I think maybe, as in literally making the text copyright free, I believe is the plan. I think something depends on how the Kickstarter goes. But essentially it means you can remix those rules, you can use them in your own thing. If you want to use the Ars Magica trademark on a book that you are publishing, then you need to go and talk to Atlas. But the other thing that's worth saying, Atlas's history with Ars Magica does go back to the 1980s, because John Nephew was the publisher on the original game when it was the company was Lion Rampant, and it was Jonathan Tweet and Mark Runhagen and their college friends putting together a little RPG in basically a shared house. And John was part of that crew, split away from it when Lion Rampant joined up with White Wolf and produced Vampire. John was, I believe, Atlas was the first company to produce a vampire supplement, being I think it was Milwaukee by Night. It was literally a 16 or 24 page adventure. It was released at Gen Con 1991, the same show where Vampire was released, and it was kind of a thank you to John. It was a quid pro quo thing for his involvement. But when Wizards of the Coast decided not to do Ars Magica 4, Atlas picked it up at that point because Jonathan Tweet was still involved and has this relationship with Atlas. I mean, Greg, you've been with Atlas since, the early 2000s for...
Well, after Unknown Armies was abandoned by its first publisher. I mean, the joke was Atlas Games, a.k.a. the Atlas home for wayward role-playing games. Yeah. Because they don't develop. It's like, no, we'll take good games that have been abandoned by the heartless market and, we'll publish Feng Shui, we'll publish Unknown Armies, we'll publish Ars Magica.
And do cracking jobs with them. Yeah, I mean, they picked up Once Upon a Time in 1992. We signed the deal. Yeah, the company was still very young at that point. So we both have this very long-lasting relationship with Atlas. When Atlas takes on a game, it takes it on for the long term.
That's true.
In a very serious way. It develops, it nurtures the game, it nurtures the game's market and its fan base. So the fact that they're doing this, that open sourcing Ars Magica, is a really, really interesting idea. They're not the first to do it, of course. There was the whole D&D's been under an SRD or OGL. There are other games that are under equivalent things. But this is it's a significant line, and I think that it's a risk that they are taking. I really hope it pays off for them.
The thing that gets said about D&D and the OGL is that they're in the business of selling players' handbooks, and everything else is ancillary. And I can see how it would be appealing to be like, oh, we would like to sell a lot of definitive edition Ars Magica books without doing the development slog and investment of creating supplements for it, because, supplements are always a tiny fraction of what the original sells. So, and yet the audience expects the supplement to be as good as the main book, if not, not as long, but it's like, oh yeah, if you've got kick-ass art in the main book, they expect kick-ass art in the supplements too.
Yeah.
And that's tough. It's tough to make that, to square that circle and make that profitable.
I think most publishers treat supplements more as marketing for the main book than anything else.
Oh, yeah. I mean, financially, that's what they are. Yeah. And just today, I read someone's article about film where they said, well, it's very unfortunate for Hollywood that they are a business that happens to have an art form stuck in the middle of it. And I'm like, oh, buddy, there's a lot of that going around.
Yep.
The maneuver that D&D introduced was, oh, well, we'll sell the core rules, and you fans can sell can make your own supplements and sell them to one another and give us a cut. And I don't know if this new definitive Ars Magica will even have the cut. It might just be like Gathering of the Juggalos, where it's like, okay, we're going to do our thing that enthuses you, and you can do this thing that makes our thing more profitable, but where you keep the money. It might be a little more honest and a little more sustainable and less prone to a new CEO saying, well, why are we only taking, a small scrape of this when it's our IP and we should be taking a huge scrape? The invisible answer being, because they're doing so much work that we don't want to do and don't want to oversee and don't want to manage and don't want to schedule and very, 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 very much don't want to pay for and promote. So, yeah, it could work out. I hope it's a huge success for Atlas.
Certainly, whenever they do a crowdfunding campaign, I assume they'll be doing a crowdfunding campaign for the new edition.
It's coming up on Back Kit.
Sounds like a good topic for a live stream to review.
Yes.
Which we do monthly live streams.
We did. Have you heard about the Unknown Armies Statosphere thing through Drive-Thru
I have.
RPG?
Yeah.
So I don't know if James has. This is
no, I haven't.
Fans of Unknown Armies can write Unknown Armies supplement material and sell it through Drive-Thru, and Atlas gets a scrape and Drive-Thru gets a scrape, but you can write your cool stuff for the game you love.
Yeah,
and
like DM Guild, but for Unknown Armies.
It's like DM Guild for Unknown Armies.
Yeah, and there's like free templates you can use to format your
and it has not been a barn burner, but there's been some good stuff put out. And so it's
probably done better than the affiliate fees we get for people clicking on the links on our website.
That is a low bar to surmount, my transatlantic friend. That's like a line of paint on the pavement.
Yeah. But to get back to the Grogs.
Back to the Grogs.
You mentioned earlier their fragility of the brief life of a Grog. And this is emphasized in this book as well, because they do have like mass combat rules and a lot of talking about the military organization of Grogs. Because I think most Grogs are the sword and shield armed guards. That's sort of like, I think, the first version of the Grog, or like the archetype that the first edition sort of established.
The man at arms,
or the, like I said, the red shirt comparison of, they're the ones who show you how the monster works by running out to go kill that rabbit. Oh God, that.
Yeah, and there is a huge emphasis on guard rotas as well. I mean, pages of stuff on organizing.
That felt excessive.
It really did. There's a moment, and you go, "Oh, that's gone into in quite some detail." And 2 pages. There's more. There's more of it. But it does emphasize the fact that yes, a lot of their duties, even if they're just ordinary folk, will be keeping watch, because this is a hostile environment, and hostile environments tend to kill you. So, yeah.
I do like that they include, like, this material about, like, they do describe several times in the book that the Magi, like, their abilities, their powers are very, very strong, but they're not, like, when the fighting actually starts, they kind of hide, it's the Grog's job now. Like, the wizards usually cast the spells ahead of time to harm the enemy or benefit the Grogs to enhance their ability somehow. And then, like, the actual fighting is done by these regular people with swords and shields. And I do like that contrast where you could have a military campaign where it's like protect the wizard. We're fighting bandits and the wizards don't have time to cast a lightning bolt or summon something from beyond time and space to help us. So better go stab those guys about it. But like the Grogs are not disposable, because they talk about also there's an emphasis on this sense of community. The Grogs are in this isolated social structure that is like a parallel to the medieval fiefdom structure, but like still separate. Like the covenants are not supposed to get involved in politics, although they frequently do. But like Grogs have a retirement plan. They have pensions.
One of the things that I think has been blended into Ars Magica very nicely is the idea that, okay, players in the 21st century are going to have a very, very different view of, say, I don't know, to grab an example at random, gender roles than people in the 13th century. And part and parcel of wizard outre-ness and outsiderness is that wizards are just are more likely to have progressive ideas about gender and sex roles in society. And so if you're a woman who is just fed up with the idea that my only role is to get married and be a baby maker, well, you can run off and live with the wizards. And if you're okay with that, and it sounds like a lot of people who wind up at covenants are social outcasts, and that the average person is like, oh, you gotta go live with the wizards with all the, they don't even believe in women being married against their will. And it's like, well, don't threaten me with a good time then. I'm off to see the wizard. And so
yeah, I really like that part. In fact, I think one of my favorite A good third of this book is the Grog templates. And one of them
60
is
pages, yeah.
Yes, yeah. It's a good chunk of the book is the bodyguard maidservant.
Maidservant.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I love this one. It is basically you're a woman, you're treated as maidservant, but you're also taught how to stab people because guess what? No one's going to expect the maidservant to have a knife or a sword.
The assassins you foil are only slightly less surprised that you can fight than they would be if a chair started hitting them.
Yeah.
My note, bodyguard maidservant sounds cool as hell.
Mm-hmm.
And then confessor sounds very fun. I would love to play the character that everyone else tells their sins to.
Yeah.
That would be hilarious.
But to talk a little bit, I also like one thing this book does really well are sidebars, which are separated as a little box, and like every chapter has very interesting sidebars. So like for the templates, they talk about story seeds, and also there's story seeds for each of the template, and there are like several dozen templates. They also talk about not as a side, but like concept variations, which I also like. Like you could be instead of a bodyguard, an assassin who goes in disguise and go all Assassin's Creed on them. Like a lot of RPG books have kind of extraneous sidebars. There's a sort of a low bar with it, but like I think the ones in this book are done very well, and they're very always interesting to read. I got distracted frequently, just like, oh wait, I need to go back to the main text, and like, oh wait, this sidebar is cool, and this one's cool.
Yeah, I mean, being shown how to use stuff or how something will fit within your narrative structure, within the ideas that you may be coming up with, is always, just so.
A lot of hand-holding that was good a lot of the time, but there were also times where it felt excessive, and it felt in some ways to me, here's where I'm going to be the cranky old man.
Oh, no.
As opposed to the genial old man.
Genial
that
old man.
I'm like, in some ways, this is offsetting issues that Ars Magica has by its Ars Magica nature. There is a character whose whole purpose for existing is offsetting the arbitrary, animals don't like wizards setting detail. And it's a setting detail that makes sense, and it's there to explain why wizards are off in covenants. It's part of the gift is, animals hate you and people are animals. People and some animals can, get used to you. And this leads into a general consideration of the Baroque intricacy of the Ars Magica setting and rules. The plus side is that the rules and the setting are smushed up together very tightly. The drawback to that is that both are so finicky and precise and granular. As I was reading this, I felt like someone was issuing me a Zen koan, and it's like, if you role play a character who drinks constantly, but you don't take the flaw drunkenness, is your Ars Magica character a drunk or not? I feel that I've done some grainy systems where things are very tightly modeled through the game mechanic, but never this tight. And the more I design, the more comfortable I am with things being a little more loose and impressionistic. There's guidelines for playing a character who's a horse, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the specific horse advantages and disadvantages, and I'm like, is fine-grained, everything must be mechanized Ars Magica's approach really the best for I want to be the pony? It feels like it is maybe a little excessively constrained. And if I had to put money, I'm not a gambling man, but if I had to put money down, my guess is that the next Ars Magica will be a lot looser and softer. What you have now is like a super tightly machined Swiss watch, where if even a single grain of sand falls into it, it's going to start to lose minutes. And the next one will be, I'm guessing, a little more fluid and where you get stuff like the 13th Age one unique thing. I'm looking at Ars Magica and I'm like, this is the antimatter twin of 13th Age's one unique thing. There is no unique thing. You can create a vast panoply of things. You can, okay, well, this is my wizard, and this is the things he's good at, and these are the spells that he can make, and here's how he makes those spells, and here's what the rules are around those spells, and here's what I roll for their duration effect requirement, and on and on and on. Down to, with the Grogs, it's like, okay, this is my Grog, and he is a silversmith, and here is the rating on his workshop, and he's he's puissant at silversmithing as opposed to just a journeyman. So and this is how old he has to be to have achieved puissance in silversmithing. And I'm not sure that degree of obsessive detail is a great fit for most gamers.
If I can pick you up on a number of points. First of all, the being a horse thing. Atlas was one of the first companies to ever publish a furry RPG. They published Furry Pirates, which I remember
that one.
Don't think it was a huge success for them, but I think it is still available.
I don't think it was.
Ahead of its time. But in terms of the virtues and the flaws, there is a thing that if you role play something a lot, the GM will just give you that virtue or that flaw, which, is quite loose and quite nice, but at the same time, there are moments I was feeling I need a bit more mechanics. Certainly the first almost half of the book is very mechanics light. It's just kind of background and structure and stuff. And then it's kind of, I feel like this needs some more integration with the game's mechanics. How does this work mechanically?
At no point did I look at anything and think I want more mechanics.
No, I just wanted more integration with the mechanics.
Yeah, okay. Do you have an example, James?
Well, I was going to say, and then you hit the Grogs in Stories chapter, and I'm a narrativist. I was like, whoa, here, and it's suddenly, what? Hold on, you've got encumbrance rules. Fuck off. If there's one thing that, for me, just turns me off a game immediately, it's encumbrance rules. And the only exception to that is Luke Crane's, and I'm blanking on the name of it, the one that's all encumbrance rules, and all the finicky little annoying mechanics. And that's the whole point of the game. That's the only one that gets away. No, it's called something like Torchlight, except Torchlight is a video game.
Torchbearer.
Yeah. And there's weapon weights and just no. This is a level of detail that is annoying and distracting. Peasants, soldiers in the Middle Ages did not know how much their weapons weighed. There is no reason for a player to have to know or a player character to have to know. Well,
they knew how much they weighed. They couldn't give you a number, but they knew how much it weighed. And
they know what it felt like in their hand.
I see where you're coming from, James. Like the negotiations and like on page 53.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff is reduced to numbers and dice rolling in a way that feels very 1980s.
Mm-hmm.
Not the fun kind of complicated, the dreary kind of complicated.
The removing player agency stuff. Players want something to happen. They go, I go and negotiate for this. And the GM goes, you fail. Oh, sorry, I mimed a rolling of dice there, which was completely useless. Because I think it was even out of the camera range that Greg and Ross can see. That's what I was doing. That was not some weird other hand gesture.
Yeah.
It's... We've moved way beyond that.
I think James made the Sicilian chin at me.
So, one example of this would be on page 53, lowest final price, value of goods minus 10% per 3 points or fraction that the buyer's bargain roll exceeds the seller's minimum value of 50% of value.
My soul is leaving my body, Ross. Make it stop. Make it stop.
Yeah, the young people would say, I am dead.
Yeah,
I think.
That's true. So I totally agree with that. Like a lot of the mechanical stuff, I feel like, but this is not a sin of Grog specifically, but of the overall Ars Magica system, which I remember being very finicky in some ways.
The curse lies not on Grogs, but on the line entire.
Again, going back to, you mentioned, the Grogs and stories, like they have a lot of story elements of talking about a sentry duty and trail food and guards and campings and like things that can happen during the game, because you're in this very specific version of, you know, what they call Mythic Europe. You have to sort of have a lot of context to create a believable, like, immersive setting. And the mechanic stuff I definitely glazed over, because they have a lot of stuff about like aging your grog, like how when you make your grog, because how do you make a grog? Creating and maintaining grogs is the chapter, which is a great title. It's like a car manual.
Well, when a mommy grog and a daddy grog love each other very much, they have a kind of special hug.
Yeah, they have all these skill packages and things you can do to make a grog quickly. But it's, you know, which I get if you're making characters for a game, but it's very dry. And then we have the virtues and flaws, which there's a lot of, I mean, these are just grog specific ones.
It feels like there's a lot, but it's only like 12 pages. It takes up a lot of the contents page, but it doesn't, there's not actually that much. The other thing is the vocabulary. There's quite an arcane vocabulary to a lot of this. There's the word grog, which is not in general parlance, is not used for kind of the peasantry or servants or whatever. It's, as far as I'm aware, as far as I can find out, an Ars Magica coinage. And then there are the levels of grogs, which you hit on page 6. The Turb, the Grex, the Custos, the Coven Folk, the Consors, and the Autocrat. And I was like, is this necessary? And then I was like, yes, it is, because you're part of a covenant. You're part of this little secret world, this little secret society hidden away from the rest of the world, because if the rest of the world finds out that you're doing magic, they will destroy you in the name of the church.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things that lures people into role-playing games, whether it's something baroque and arcane and the entire society is like this, like Empire of the Petal Throne, which we were talking about the other day. Or even the early days of D&D, learning the systems of the needlessly complicated systems of early editions of D&D or later editions of D&D feels like you are mastering secret knowledge. It feels like you are...
What the hell is a Thack Zero?
Yeah.
Exactly. Thacko, please. But, you know, Thacko was an improvement on what original what AD&D had, let alone original D&D.
Wait, why is it better to have a negative armor class? What the...
Oh, I mean, that's okay. So if there's one thing I know is that role-playing game designers love old anachronistic words and giving them a new thing. Like, I mean, I learned the word dexterity from D&D. I didn't know what that was until hand. And then like there are
artifact.
Artifact.
Duoba?
Charisma.
Yeah.
Initiative, melee, you know, like
melee.
Yes.
I can put the correct accents on melee without thinking about it to this day.
Proficiency, like there's a whole thing of mining older English for you know, cool sounding words, especially Latin terms now. Like I know Warhammer I think is the worst about this, but like it's just a long saying thing. I mean, we just talked about Vampire the Masquerade,
of extremely Baroque, extensive setting.
Oh yeah, like if I spend I mean, I'm the same thing when I'm writing a horror game or scenario. I look up old words, like what is a cool word to use for this monster.
The Sanguinariac is on its way.
Yes, see, that's way better than Bloodsucker. Yeah.
Does America have Brewer's Dictionary of Phrase and Fable?
I haven't heard of it.
I got like 15 issues of fanzines out of reading Brewer's Dictionary of Phrase and Fable, and it's still in print. And Susie Dent, British people, Susie Dent is now, I believe, editing Brewer's Dictionary of Phrase and Fable. And that's like mind explode. It's so good. Hunt down a print copy. Edition doesn't really matter. They're all great. In fact, the older ones are even weirder. It's a bit like the John Soane Museum. It's a collection of random stuff all in one place, and all of it is very different, and all of it is fascinating. From weird little phrases and turns to, you know, there'll be a mythological term, and then there'll be like a quarter of a page because it's a dictionary. It's in tiny type.
Right.
Quarter of a page on that. Brewer's Dictionary of Phrase and Fable, just an absolute recommend.
Put it in the...
Oh, that'll be highlighted in the show notes. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Put it in the notes.
Yeah.
Well, okay. And the idea of the specialized vocabulary plays into something that you know, kind of arose in me as I was reading Grogs. And this is a question which I don't think has a single definitive answer. The unsatisfying answer is going to be, well, it's going to vary from playgroup to playgroup. But what is the exact right amount of required system mastery? Because it feels like, and you know, the ancillary, what is the exact right amount of required setting mastery? Because it sounds like if you do not do your homework in Ars Magica, you are not going to get the full experience. You may be an Ars Magica tourist who can play a grog, but you're not going to be able to build a wizard effectively until you've put in the work to learn all them wizardry rules, or even just a subset of them that interest you.
I think each game has a different system and setting mastery that it is aiming for, and you can approach it at lower levels, but I think like they're optimized, and like I think Ars Magica is clearly on the higher end for both. It's right. I think the joke is like you need a master's in medieval history to really understand this game and like it.
I mean, that was the joke we made about Champions Math, right?
Yeah.
As a designer, I've tried to work around this. You know, in Termination Shock, I always wanted ignorance to be embraced, and it's like, I'm just a human and I'm stuck with all these aliens and I do not know anything about them or the safety or the danger of the world. I'm a babe in the woods, and that's the game.
So
I'm gonna find out which are the safe aliens and which are the dangerous aliens, and which are the helpful ones and which are the ones who think it's funny to watch me suffer and fail.
D&D is, I think, designed for high system mastery, and setting is obviously highly variable, probably actually on the lower end, but like obviously I think a huge number, probably even a majority of players have less system mastery than the game rules assume, and it still works because of the finessing by individual GMs on that. But there is a tension between that, because I think like a lot of video games have this balance between competitive multiplayer games. You know, we'll have a balance between casual people who are playing for fun and then the competitive scene. And then like the competitive scene requires constant balance patches and fine tuning the game to make it fun, and like, which is a minority of the players, right? But like the majority of players still have to go through what competitive is doing because they're setting the pace.
And if it's broken for competitive, the competitive players are the ones everyone pays attention to.
Yeah, and I think some game RPGs are like that too, like D&D. But Ars Magica, I think it's such a niche thing that I don't think there's a lot of problem of, you know, casuals playing it, because you have to be really into this very specific historical fantasy to really engage with it.
Whereas, onboarding to a dungeon fantasy game is typically a lot easier. And part of that is that it doesn't have the super grainy setting. Or if it does, you're not interacting with 90% of the super grainy setting unless you choose to, unless you're GM. And then it's on your GM to be like, okay, so now I'm going to explain why this city is split down the middle, and there you have two entirely different governance styles and different leaders and even speak different languages on the two sides. And so you're going to have to blah, blah, blah. And the players are just sort of glazing over and checking their phones. Or the players are like, yeah, okay, I got it, this city, and maybe tuning out the historical parts, but picking up on, if I go there, I'll get in a fight. Well, maybe I do want to go there.
I think it's a struggle for game design, but I think most RPGs are designed with sort of kind of implicit, not explicit, like this is like how they're marketed, right? How they're described, and like how they're presented to people kind of like helps inform whether this is a high buy-in or a low buy-in kind of game.
And, you know, there is this idea that the lower the buy-in, the better. And I'm not sure commercially or creatively if in terms of saleability and in terms of player satisfaction.
Yeah.
If having it be as easy as possible is actually desirable.
Yeah, I don't think low buy-in is a very popular marketing ploy a lot of times. Yeah. Because like how many failed Universal RPGs have we seen in like super rules light? Yeah.
Yeah, and lots of games have kind of quick start kits, and get a basic grip on the setting and understand a little bit.
Right.
But the first hit is free. Let's not forget.
Yeah.
And then it's $60 a book thereafter. And D&D does that now. Basic D&D went away for a long time, and they wanted you to go straight in on advanced, and that did not work. So they've now. There was a while in the 90s I was really interested in how D&D was onboarding people and looking at the starter sets, and the early 2000s as well, in fact.
Sure.
And the answer generally was very badly.
Yeah.
A lot of their starter sets were really not good. And they tried to do some clever stuff with audio CDs and bringing people in that way. And it's just... It was like they'd lost touch of what made the game magic for new players and what people actually wanted from the game. But I think we're bang on touch with it now, and the number of really clever starter sets, and even comparatively little games like Salvage Union, small press British staff mecha, very beautifully done, now has a kind of a starter set for it. I really hope it does well for them.
I haven't heard of this.
Oh, well, hopefully we will come to... Oh, wait, don't we do some live streams?
Yeah, I think we could do one. I have the PDFs of Salvage Union. I've been meaning to play it. It's a mecha RPG that doesn't require a map or grid.
Ooh.
Yeah, exactly.
Theater of the... I know you love you a theater of the mind.
Well, I can't do grid combat anymore. It's just too much for my group. But to get back to Grogs,
yes,
I think
I'm sorry.
Grogs,
there are no rules for giant robot Grogs.
No,
which perhaps is an oversight.
Yeah, they could have a Colossus.
But
in there or
hold
something.
on, you can be a role-bound Grog, where it's like you have through whatever means, your locksmith character is now no longer just like Gregor the locksmith. He's now just the Covenant locksmith, and everyone knows the Covenant locksmith has been there for 90 years, and nobody knows his name, and he doesn't eat, and his hands are literally keys and lockpicks. And this is a kind of character you can develop as a Grog, or, the example from the book is the ferryman, who doesn't have a name, he's just the ferryman, and he never leaves his boat. And ferries people out to the island that the Covenant's on, and if he doesn't like you, he won't take you out there. Or if he thinks you're bad for the Covenant, he won't take you out there. And you could find out the tragic backstory of this Grog, or you could just keep treating him like an ATM, an inanimate object. This is very convenient.
So,
I mean, kind of, except doesn't talk.
I mean, the thing about
so
Grogs, though, is I think it's a book designed to help people sort of get into the high buy-in that the system requires. Because, again, we have all this setting material, all this material to sort of like, not only like what Grogs did and how they worked in the setting, but also like all these story ideas. I think that's the single greatest thing about this book, is that it has so many story ideas and story elements to integrate into a campaign. Every single of the dozens of templates has story elements, and they're all interesting. They're all written like none of the templates are sort of like ignored or like, oh, this one sucks. No, they all have something going for them. And I think that's like a book that anyone who wants to play Ars Magica could benefit from. Because like, even if you're not playing Grogs, even if you're not focused on Grogs, it helps you understand like how special the wizards are, because they don't have to do any of this stuff. They got people to do it for them. And like this sort of symbiotic relationship between them. So it's a great, a really interesting world building. And I think this is the kind of book you want to write for your game if you have a really high setting buy-in. Like the system stuff is pretty minimal and like, but like the setting stuff is gold. And I think like if you're doing a very complex, very unique setting, like this is the kind of book you would need to write to get people to want to understand how your game works, how it plays. That's sort of my thought of Grogs.
I mean, what it makes me think of, a book I bought, ages ago in the last century, I think it was called Medieval Manor, and it was a game. It was I think it was by Lisa Steele, but don't quote me on that. But it was a mechanics-free historian's overview of what medieval life was like. And it's like, okay, here's medieval town, here's a medieval village, here's a medieval farm, here's medieval governance.
Yeah.
And it was all the stuff that's sort of in Grogs, except it was presented not as character, but as setting.
Yeah. James?
Yeah. It's, so many similar books. The one that leapt to mind was a time traveler's guide to medieval England. But, the setting stuff is great, and it's absolutely solid and gives you a lot of context and stuff you can fall back on. But Ross, I think you're exactly right. What this is a fount of ideas, not just for adventures and for stories necessarily, but just for adding to the richness of the background. The little characters, like the guy who's got lockpicks for hands or keys for hands. And every single one of the potential character templates is just full of stories. You drop that into the world and it's like, well, they've clearly got a story. There's one of the templates you can be is an ex-prostitute. And I have a couple of quibbles with this because they're automatically assumed to be female. And also it's not really explained what they do now. But, there's potential there. The magic farrier I talked about.
That's the kind of character that's the kind of person who is outcast from society, or for whom living in normal society has so many difficulties that it's like, well, I guess I'll take my chances with the magic weirdos in the Covenant.
Yes.
It's the Covenant or the Convent, baby.
But also what happened to them in the course of their previous life? Who did they meet? Who did they sleep with? What did they overhear? Loads of, the potential there. Failed Apprentice is another one. Murderer
I love that one.
Is one of the, you can just be the, what do you do? I'm the murderer.
What I liked about the murderer template was it's like, at some point you killed somebody, but that's not the big deal because Grogs do that. No, the big deal is everyone knows you did it. It was against the law, and you have refused to make penance for it. You're
unrepentant. You do it
You're
again.
unrepentant. That, it's like, no, I'm not going to say my rosaries and go to confession. I feel very strongly that I did the right thing, actually.
It's like that old joke, which I actually tell in Back to the 007 episode, the James Ernest movie, A Man Between, that I've been unable to track down. But the joke about what do they call you? It's I've done all of this. Do they call me so and so the house builder? No, they do not. Do they call me so and so the road mender? No, they do not. You murder one Magus.
And you Jeff the murderer.
Jeff the murderer. Yeah, it's that is not the usual punchline, but it works. It fits completely. So I've got quibbles with the book. It's sometimes, yes, horribly mechanical in ways that feel very old school, in a way that Ars Magica for me never has. But the richness, the texture, the flavor that comes out of it, and just the potential for expanding out your game in different directions. And I think you could use this if you just ditch the mechanical stuff. You could use this as so much inspiration for any fantasy game or historical game, kind of medieval history, dark, even Dark
Vampire
Ages.
of the Dark Ages. There's tons of ideas.
That would work. If you've got a campaign that's sort of kind of centered around a castle or a household or a big community, then
can you imagine
these Grogs are your
Covenant?
people.
Yeah, they're called the Tremere.
Didn't it? Because
I think that's canon too.
It was going to overlap. I mean, it's the same core developer or one of the same core developers.
Yeah. My favorite RPG books are the ones that I can just pick up and flip to a random page and find something fun and interesting to read. I do that a lot. And this is definitely a book that qualifies as that, because I could just read any of these templates like, oh, that's cool. That's neat. Oh, Failed Apprentice. Oh, he can get his magic back through a quest. Oh, that's a cool story idea. Let's do that. Or I think my favorite is actually the ones who've survived the Covenant that was destroyed, and they're refugees, the refugee librarian, and whoa, what's their story? Oh, we got to go back like that. Yeah, I want to see that. going to the ruins of the destroyed covenant turns into, you know, survival horror kind of thing. So I think that's sort of the if you're an Ars Magica player, like you mentioned, any historical game, you know what, you could do this in Warhammer 40k. They have medieval words in 40k. You could have psychers that are like wizards, and like you could do the whole thing.
So the Sisters of Battle never see us. We just polish their armor after they
have chapter serves. You know, like I actually have an idea for running a game set in Warhammer 40k where the idea is, Space Marine died in the swamp 5 years ago. The war's over. But he had that cool hammer. Yeah, that's like 1,000 years old and it has a name. It's really cool. You need to go fetch that hammer. None of you are strong enough to wield that thing. You have to go in the swamp, find it, and bring it back. Everyone's going to try and kill you to bring it back. So good luck. That's the kind of thing you do.
And the characters would be what? Guardsmen?
Oh, I'll let them make whatever kind of like regular person.
Just chumps.
Yeah, just chumps. Yeah. Thank you all so much for listening to this episode. It was a lot of fun to talk about the Rosencrantz and Guildensterns of Ars Magica running around the wizards. Our next episode is going to be slightly different, and we're talking about Dogs in the Vineyard, which is a backer curated episode, and that will be certainly a historically important RPG in terms of influence and design. And there is a newer version, of the rules out, which we'll talk about as well. So stay tuned for that. And thank you all so much for backing this Kickstarter and for listening to this podcast. And as always, we have a Discord that's open to the public. Please join it and listen or join in the discussion there where we talk about games and stuff every day. And check out the show notes for this episode in particular, because there's going to be a lot of reference books mentioned. That
oh boy.
Yeah. So thank you again, James, for doing that. And we'll talk to you next time. Bye.
Bye.